Hi everyone, Tim here to take us through the next study in our Ecclesiastes series. Carl just wanted me to say that with this weekend, the 13th and 14th of March being Recharge, we will be taking a 1-week break in our fellowship groups from Ecclesiastes. This means that you have the chance either to do a catch-up study, if you'd like to do that, or to do a fellowship group social. And then this study will be for the week of the 21st to the 27th. And so the sermon preached on this study will be on the 21st of March. This, our second last study in the book of Ecclesiastes, will be looking at the theme of justice. As you know, we haven't just been looking at one specific passage in Ecclesiastes with these last few studies, but rather chasing a theme throughout the book. So our main passage for the study and in your fellowship group questions is Ecclesiastes 3 verse 16 to 4 verse 4, though we'll be looking a little bit at chapter 8 as well. But we will refer in the study guide to various other places in the book of Ecclesiastes so that we have a holistic understanding of how the teacher deals with this topic of justice in the book. It is worth just saying that the wisdom literature books in the Bible cover different aspects of the same thing often. And so with this study being about the topic of injustice and suffering, it is worth noting that the book of Job deals with these topics from another angle, a more personal and emotional one. And it would be worth thinking about if there's people in your group who are thinking about this topic in a more personal and invested way, directing them towards the book of Job, or spending a few minutes as a group discussing in what ways this more intellectual approach that the teacher takes could be more helpful or more unhelpful to someone who's dealing with grief right now. The aim of this study is to discover that an accurate view of life under the sun, so remember this is the first of our major themes, this is the vantage point that the teacher has chosen. Well, this accurate view recognizes that the relationship between the way that people live and what they gain from living that way is hebel, or as we've said, enigmatic and senseless. So remember the meaning of that word hebel, smoke, vapor. There's kind of two key ideas. One, this transience, impermanence, it doesn't last, it disappears. And secondly, this meaningless, this you can't grasp it, it just doesn't make sense to those of us living under the sun. And those ideas are going to be key in this study. As we look at this question, remember that the underlying question of the entire book is, what does man gain for all of his toil under the sun? And so that's the question when we think about justice, or what we're thinking about, the fundamental pursuit is, well, what lasts? What do we gain for the work that we do? And so that's underlying everything that we cover in the study. And it's kind of been precipitated by the teacher's conclusion in at the end of that passage on time that we did in our last study, 3 verse 15. He says, what has already been, what will be, has been before, and God will call the past to account. And that's where he starts heading in chapter 3 verse 17, this idea of God bringing judgment for both the righteous and the wicked, because there's a time for everything and for every activity, and so there's going to be a time to judge every deed. And the way we've broken up this study is into 3 main points, and that is, first, what does the teacher see? What does the teacher understand by this that he's seen? And finally, what does the teacher conclude? So let's look first at what the teacher sees. And as we work through these passages, what we're going to find is that the teacher discovers that things are not the way they should be. So there's a mismatch between what he expects or what should be and what actually is. As has often been the case in Ecclesiastes, it's a bit of a reality check. And so as we work through these passages, we'll see that he sees in the place of judgment where there should be justice, instead we find wickedness. He repeats it, in the place of justice, wickedness was there. He goes on to say in chapter 7 verse 15 that this is what he's seen. He's seen a righteous man who shouldn't be perishing in his righteousness, perishing, and similarly a wicked man living long in his wickedness. There's again a mismatch. In 8 verse 10 he sees a similar thing. He says, I saw the wicked buried, those who used to come and go from the holy place and receive praise in the city where they did this. This too is meaningless. And so he sees these wicked people who don't deserve to be buried, as we see throughout the rest of the Old Testament. This idea of being buried is something that the wickedness are not supposed to receive. The wicked are supposed to remain unburied. That's sort of the curse that remains on them. But these wicked people, they go through their whole life to the holy place. They receive praise in the city, even though they're wicked, and they receive burial. And so what's particularly remarkable about this is this kind of time and death catching up with them. In a sense, it almost never seems to happen. They go their whole life without their wickedness ever catching up with them, and they die and are buried without ever receiving justice for what they have done. And the teacher goes on to say that this actually has consequences. In 8 verse 11, he notes that when this happens, when the wicked don't get what they deserve, or when the sentence for a crime is not quickly carried out, people see this and they take note, and actually it informs the way that people behave. So people's hearts are filled with schemes to do wrong because they never see the wicked getting what they deserve. And so how does the teacher understand all of this? Well, to one extent, he pushes the boundaries of his chosen vantage point a little bit, in that he looks not only at life under the sun, but he also considers God, which he usually tries not to do in his pursuit of what do we gain in this book. And so as he considers God, he says to himself, almost consoling himself, well, God will bring judgment on both the righteous and the wicked. There will be a time for judgment. And in 8 verse 12 to 13, he notes that although a wicked person commits 100 crimes and they may live a long time, it will be better with those who fear God, who are reverent before him, because those who do not fear God, well, it won't go well with them. That's what he says. That's what he thinks. Their days will not lengthen like a shadow. Of course, we start to wonder here, well, you've just said a little bit earlier that actually the wicked manage to live long, they manage to receive respect and honor that they don't deserve, and sometimes the righteous die in their righteousness without receiving what they deserve. And so we've got this sort of contradiction going on in Ecclesiastes, and even the teacher, what he says to himself on the one hand, what he sees, and kind of what he says must be the case, they seem to go head to head. They don't seem to match up. And he faces this head on in verse 14 of chapter 8. He says, this is meaningless, not in the sense necessarily that it has no meaning, but in the sense that he can't work out the meaning of this. It doesn't make sense. It's hevel, it's transient, it's enigmatic. The righteous get what the wicked deserve. The wicked get what the righteous deserve. This is meaningless. He offers one other explanation in chapter 3, and we'll look at that more closely in a second. In chapter 3, verse 18 to 21, the teacher takes a slightly different approach to understanding this, and he says to himself this idea: as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like animals. And now the commentators tell us that we shouldn't just understand this test as an idea of examination, but also as this idea of demonstrating a demonstration, in the same way that an exam might be an examination of a pupil, but also a demonstration to the teachers and to the parents and to the institution of where they are at. And so the NET translates it this way. It says, it is for the sake of people, so God can clearly show them that they are like animals. And so this is this alternate idea that the teacher has, that perhaps all this injustice is demonstrating to people that they are just like animals, insofar as the same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so the other dies. They have the same breath, and humans seemingly don't have any advantage over animals. They don't gain anything that animals gain, because everything is meaningless, and they all go to the same place. They all come from dust, and to dust they all return. And so seemingly at the end of their lives, humans, for all their toil and advantages and intellect and skill, haven't gained anything more than animals have. And so perhaps all this injustice is to demonstrate this to humans, that this is what life is. And so he concludes at the end, he says, well, who knows if the human spirit rises upward and if the spirit animal goes down into the earth, because under the sun, all he can see is that they go to the same place. So what does the teacher conclude from all of this? Well, he draws two major conclusions. And the first is that we should expect injustice. He says it's inevitable, and so don't be surprised. In 5 verse 8 to 9, he says, when you see the poor oppressed in the district and justice and rights being denied, don't be surprised at such things, because that's the way things are. One official is higher than the other, and there's one higher than them still, and they're all working for the king, and this oppression, this is just the way that life is. In fact, he says that this is so set that the only people who are able to avoid this are those who are never born. Those that are dead, well, at least they are already dead. They no longer have to experience it. The living who are still alive do. But the only people who will never experience the evil that is done under the sun are those who have never been born. Which leads him to the second conclusion, which is that the best thing to do is just to enjoy life. And we've seen this recurring conclusion a couple of other times already in Ecclesiastes. All he can commend is the enjoyment of life. And the reason he says that is because there is, first of all, things to enjoy in life. You can eat and drink and be glad, and then at least you will have joy accompanying you in all your toil. But at the end of the day, there's nothing more to be found in justice than just this enjoyment of what you have at the present time. In fact, he says, in a sense, this whole inquiry, and this is the severe reality check that Ecclesiastes gives us, is that, in a sense, it was somewhat useless, because who can actually bring others to see what will happen after them? You'd rather not look and just enjoy what you have now. In fact, as he says in 8 verse 15, there's nothing better than just to enjoy it. He's had a look and he can't see anything more worthwhile. Well, the advantage that we have over the teacher is that we've not limited ourselves to life under the sun, and in fact we have Jesus and the New Testament as well to help inform our understanding of justice in this life. And we need to make sure that we don't rush to Jesus to contradict or to contrast with the teacher, but first to look at what Jesus affirms about the teacher, and that is that everything that the teacher has said about the inevitability, about injustice, the righteous being found in the place of the wicked, is actually affirmed by Jesus, and his life is proof that it's true. So Jesus is the perfectly righteous person who ends up on a cross in the place of the wicked. And so his life demonstrates that what the teacher has been saying is correct. But more than that, the New Testament writers see Jesus' death and resurrection as actually being vindicated by God when he's raised to life. And so Jesus' resurrection demonstrates to the world, firstly, the justness of the judge, and secondly, that Jesus, in this life under the sun, was right to entrust himself to God to make things right. And more than that, as Christians, we believe that Jesus' resurrection is also his appointment to being judge of the world. And so now when we look for justice, we look for justice from our judge and King Jesus, and we expect it from him. And that gives us encouragement as we look at a gospel like John, where Jesus says that a time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out, and those who've done what is good will rise to live, and those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned. And so Jesus is not just proof that injustice is inevitable, but he is also proof that because the judge is just and because he's been appointed judge, that justice is also inevitable one day. Well, of course, the challenge for us then is to think about, well, how can we work for a justice that lasts? And as Jesus demonstrates to us, the only way of achieving a justice that lasts is by entrusting yourself into the just judge. And the wonderful thing about the New Testament is that we are invited to partner with the only eternally just kingdom by witnessing to the world about this kingdom. So Paul sees it in Ephesians chapter 5 as us becoming children of the light. We were once in darkness, but you are light in the Lord. So as long as we remain in Jesus, part of his kingdom, we become children of that light, and that light is a witness to the world about the Lord. And so the fruit of the light consists of goodness and righteousness and truth. And similarly, our work lasts only insofar as it's joined with the lasting cross-shaped change of Jesus. And so in this world, under the sun, all our injustice and sufferings are actually achieving something that is eternal, that is lasting, that outweighs all the suffering and injustice of the world, provided that we are able to see them as part of a kingdom that is not visible, that is unseen, but will last and is eternal because of the work that Jesus has done on the cross. Carl has written an article about this, which you might like to consult in the group guide.